If you want the key to true greatness, if you want the key to true strength and power, you will find it in humility. Jesus was talking about St. John the Baptist, and he said, "There is no greater man born of woman than St. John the Baptist." And it was precisely because of his humility. John the Baptist, speaking for himself, spoke with humility, and he recognized the truth about himself. He said, "I am not the Christ. I am just a voice crying in the wilderness. And there is one greater than I coming after me. He is the Christ, and I'm not fit to undo his sandals. And he must increase, and I must decrease." What greater humility can you have than that? And so Jesus calls him the greatest man born of woman. The greatest downfall of a person, or the chink in anyone's armor, or the Achilles tendon that will bring a person down, is pride. It was pride that made the greatest of the angels fall. It was pride that brought about Hitler's demise. And I'm told, and I have experience of this in the confessional, that pride is still the devil's favorite sin. Ultimately, pride comes into every sin. And therefore, St. James, who gives us some very beautiful and practical advice, he says, "The higher you rise in society, humble yourself all the more." The beginning of a downfall begins with a false idea of self. Having a false idea of self gives birth to pride and ultimately leads to destruction in one way or another. Again, just look at the lives of people like Hitler, Stalin, Mugabe. I might get into trouble for saying some of these things. But the devil, and the cheek of him, he tempts Jesus to have a false idea of himself. When Jesus went into the desert for 40 days, the devil says to him, "If you are the Christ," I mean, what a cheek, "if you are the Christ." He was the Christ. But the devil's trying to sow a seed of doubt in the mind of Jesus so that he would have a false idea of himself. So he wants Jesus instead to puff himself up with pride. But Jesus knew the truth, and he told the devil where to go. John the Baptist also knew the truth, and therefore Jesus called him great. Then in that wonderful teaching that Jesus gives us on the Sermon on the Mount, he teaches us the Beatitudes. And one of them he says, "Blessed are the gentle, blessed are the humble, they will inherit the earth." Not the proud and the powerful, but the gentle and the humble will inherit the earth. They are the ones who have great power and true strength. If you really want to show somebody how strong you are, show them how gentle you are. Look at the lives of all those people who were truly great and who made the world a better place. It was because of their humility. And of course, I'd number all the saints in those people. But look at the life of Jesus Christ himself. If anyone has the right to be proud, it is Jesus. If anyone has the right to call himself great, it is Jesus. After all, he is God. And God is all-powerful and he is almighty. He is the one who created the universe. And so he is greater than the universe. There is nothing greater than Jesus. He is God. And yet, St. Paul tells us in that beautiful hymn towards the beginning of his letter to the Philippians that Jesus did not cling to his equality with God the Father as something to be grasped at, but he humbled himself and took on the form of a slave. And he died a shameful death on the cross. He put a towel around his waist and he washed his disciples' feet. What greater example of humility do we have than Jesus? Look at the life of Mary, the mother of Jesus. Look at the humility of this woman who crushes the head of the serpent, the proud serpent. From her lips, we hear Mary say, "God has looked on me in my nothingness." And we had Mary's song sung to us beautifully today after the first reading. That was Mary's song. God has looked on me in my nothingness, and therefore all generations will call me blessed. Holy is God's name. And in the same song it says, the proud will be flung down from their thrones, and the humble will be raised. If you're looking for a revolutionary song in the gospel, it's Mary's song, the Magnificat. My soul glorifies the Lord. If you want to see an example of another humble man, you had it this evening in the play, St. Francis of Assisi. Humility was the foundation stone of his life. And you know what? He got his spirituality from St. John the Baptist. St. Francis of Assisi's baptismal name was John, Giovanni, after St. John the Baptist. Francis, or Francesco, which translated literally means the Frenchie, was the nickname that his father gave to him after he came back from a trip to France. And he was so impressed with France, his son was born while he was there, that he named his son the Frenchie, Francesco. So he was the very first person in history to have that name. But St. Francis had a very deep devotion to St. John the Baptist. St. Francis recognized the truth about himself, and he said, and he wrote down, "What I am before God, that I am and nothing more." He could recognize, therefore, also the truth about Jesus Christ. If we recognize the truth about ourselves, we recognize the truth about Jesus. So in the life of St. Francis and in his writings, humility oozes out of him. He writes down in a letter that he wrote, talking about Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament, "O humble sublimity, O sublime humility, that the Lord of the universe should so humble himself as to take on the form of a little piece of bread. Look, brothers and sisters, at the humility of God. Therefore, pour out your hearts before him, so that he who gives himself to you totally may receive you totally. And in another letter that he wrote, he said, and in fact this letter is addressed to all of you, that's the kind of letter he wrote. He said, with all the love that I am capable of, I would humble myself and kiss your feet. If only you would love the Lord Jesus in his most holy body and blood in the Blessed Sacrament above everything else in the world. And if you like, and you want me to kiss your feet after Mass, come to me. Just love Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament. So if you want to be truly great, humble yourselves all the more through your patience, through your willingness to forgive, through your trust in God. These are all acts of humility. Someone who is truly humble relies fully on the power of God, trusting God in every situation, and therefore makes himself fully God's agent, allowing the power of God to gush forth through their life, making God's kingdom present, allowing Christ to come and to do his work. A person who is truly humble will recognize the truth about themselves, the truth about God, and even if they do have doubts. St. John the Baptist had his doubts, but Jesus reassured him. And Christ will say to them, just as he reassured St. John the Baptist, the blind see, the deaf hear, the dumb speak, the poor hear good news spoken to them, the broken-hearted are healed. Captives are set free, and prisoners are released. And they will know the Lord's favor.